From the look of things, the year 2020 is going to be the year of the Godzilla crossover. Technically, the seeds were planted at the end of 2019, when the trailer for Godzilla vs. Symphogear unexpectedly popped up, specifically advertising Godzilla-themed DLC for a Symphogear mobile game. Following this was the announcement of a new anime Godzilla appearing in a film based on the Shinkalian mecha anime. In this case, however, the crossover has been doubled, for not only is Godzilla encountering Shinkalian, but the mech in this sequence is piloted by none other than Hatsune Miku. Yes, the same Hatsune Miku who started off as a Vocaloid video game character before ascending to the status of a genuine J-pop idol. Oh, and I suppose I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the theme park attraction which crossed Shin Godzilla over with Neon Genesis Evangelion. And all of this is on top of the long-anticipated rematch between Godzilla and King Kong, which will be arriving in November. So Toho has been networking like crazy as of late, putting their biggest star, literally and figuratively, in all sorts of different properties, a lot of them connected to anime, it would seem. It's definitely great news for fans, as it's expanding the kaiju's presence in pop culture, but personally I'm wondering, why is this? What's prompting Toho to sign all these deals and put Godzilla in so many cameos and crossovers? Well, Godzilla vs. Kong was in the works for a long time. It was planned way before any of these other things were announced, so it's kind of an outlier. What's especially curious to me is that Toho is putting Godzilla in a lot of anime recently. Now, as already mentioned, the Symphogear crossover is for a mobile game, but it's still a crossover involving an anime franchise. Moreover, the Godzilla appearing in these crossovers appears to be more in line with the classic depiction of the character, as opposed to some radical new interpretation that resembles the original about as much as a tomato resembles the Golden Gate Bridge. Speaking of which, it does seem interesting that Toho is specifically pushing for Godzilla to show up in anime, especially after the character's last venture into that medium was such a disaster. Of course, Toho has said they want to bring the character back into the realm of animation again, but why are they doing so much in the way of crossovers as opposed to just doing a new Godzilla-centric anime of their own? Well, cross-promotion is certainly a big part of it. That means both companies involved get publicity, and if it does well, you also get the merchandising side of things, and it's a very financially sound way to go about things. That, of course, is assuming it does well. But I think there is something else going on here. I think what Toho is doing is testing the waters. Like I said, they do have plans to bring Godzilla back into anime. They clearly want to do this. But at the same time, their last attempt at a Godzilla anime did not go over very well. Actually, that's an understatement. People outright loathe it around the world. I think at this point it's officially the most hated incarnation of Godzilla outside of the 1998 one. But heck, even the 1998 version did better numbers than the anime trilogy. And the only part of the trilogy that people actually come close to liking are the prequel novels, which are closer in line to what people actually wanted from a Godzilla anime than the actual Godzilla anime. Then again, that's mostly based on hearsay. So even though Toho clearly wants a do-over with a Godzilla anime, they're cautious. They have some trepidation when it comes to just jumping right back in. So the different crossovers they've been doing are an attempt to test the waters a little. First and foremost, it's worth noting that every time Godzilla appears in one of these crossovers, he's more in line with the traditional version of the character than any newer versions. Despite featuring a brand new design, Snow Godzilla, or Ice Godzilla, or whatever the final name for this version winds up being in the Shinkalian movie, moves and behaves in a way very similar to the Heisei Godzilla. The aforementioned Evangelion crossover uses the Shin incarnation of Godzilla, but that version of Godzilla is slightly more active and more in line with the early Showa version of the character. For Symphogear, that's kind of more of an aesthetic choice than anything else, but hey, they still went specifically with a Heisei Godzilla, as well as mixing it up with Showa, Heisei, and Millennium Kaiju for all of the other characters you can get. It's also worth noting that the three series they went with specifically are shonen action series. They're all sci-fi action shows, often with a more serious side to them. Now, while I haven't seen Shincalion specifically, I have seen both Evangelion and Symphogear, and I can tell you that they are also very character-driven. The complexity of the characters varies, but all the same, they are still character-driven, and they are characters who are far more than just one-note archetypes. And it's also worth knowing that each of these anime properties Godzilla is crossing over with straddle the line between the traditional and the non-traditional. They deal with a lot of familiar tropes, but often they do them in unconventional ways, thus creating something that feels new. So I have a feeling that what Toho is doing is putting Godzilla into all of these different works, seeing how the audience responds, then coming back with all of that feedback, and crafting a series based on that. This, theoretically, would allow them to come up with something that would appeal not just to Godzilla fans, but also to fans of the works in which Godzilla is appearing. It's well known by this point that the anime trilogy was intended to bring in a brand new audience for Godzilla. However, by making so many unnecessary changes, they kind of wound up shooting themselves in the foot. As the song goes, I said it once before, but it bears repeating now. The most likely outcomes of bringing in a new audience with the anime trilogy were as follows. 1. You drive those new people away from the franchise entirely because the movies were terrible. 2. The new audience gets attached to the anime trilogy, and when they go back and see that the older films are nothing like the anime trilogy, they decide to stick only with those 3 films and ignore everything else. Or 3, events very similar to outcome number 2, except in this case the audience goes back and realizes that the older stuff is not just different from the anime trilogy but better, which means they completely abandon the anime trilogy and anything associated with it. That's the risk you run when you try bringing someone in with something that's completely unrecognizable from the thing you want them to like in the first place. But now we see Toho is mixing a traditional Godzilla with some slightly more non-traditional anime. Rather than try reinventing the wheel and presenting a new potential audience with something that's not representative of Godzilla, Toho is instead introducing the real Godzilla to that audience little by little, with the outcome, if all goes well, being the new audience getting into not just that specific version of Godzilla, but Godzilla as a whole. And any new Godzilla-centric anime would hopefully be in a similar vein to the series that he's currently appearing in, though hopefully not to the point that it just becomes derivative. So clearly the hope is that if these do well, this will give Toho the lessons they need to craft a better Godzilla anime of their own. And if they don't do well, they'll just have to keep looking. Naturally, we don't know what exactly is going to happen, but I'd like to think that Toho has learned their lesson. If they have, maybe the next Godzilla anime will be better. I certainly hope it is. Anyway, those are my insights into why I think Godzilla's appearing in so many different anime titles recently. Will this potentially lead to other crossovers in the future? Well, we're just gonna have to wait and see. Until such time as we meet again, this is the Omni Viewer signing off. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like it as well as subscribe to the channel for more content of a similar nature. Also, check the description for links to our Twitter, DeviantArt, and Patreon pages, as well as the Amazon link for the novel Operation Red Dragon: The Daikaiju Wars Part 1, penned by yours truly. Thank you all, and we appreciate your support.